there's certainly situations and jobs that are worse than what I have at McCracken for sure. But I really believe that the kids aren't going to care any more than we care ourselves. The kids aren't going to work any harder than we work ourselves. And the kids aren't going to practice any more than we prepare for our rehearsals. And I think the kids and the programs are going to reflect us, and what we put into it will reflect. And even at the beginning, you have a lot of influence over the entire culture of the program just based on how you walk into it yourselves. And it's that old quote, be the change you want to see in the world. And you've got to be the change you want to see in your classroom, both at a micro level in terms of those rehearsals, and in a macro level in terms of the entire culture of the program, and how that fits within the culture of the school.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I really appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now, on to my next guest, Chip Stefano. Hi, Chip.
Hi, Mark.
Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks so much for having me on. This is great. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep, it is. So, Chip, can you introduce yourself for the listeners?
Sure. My name is Chip Stefano. I just finished my 23rd year as director of bands at McCracken Middle School in Skokie, Illinois, and just finished my 10th and final year as director of the wind ensemble at the University of Chicago.
Cool. And so, Chip, I know that you've been in the Chicagoland area for a long time, but for my listeners who don't know Chicago, can you tell the listeners where Skokie is?
Sure. We're just north of the city. We border Chicago, and just west of Evanston, Illinois, which is where Northwestern is. So we're awfully close to Northwestern and the city. Excellent.
So, Chip, can you give everyone your musical background? How did you get into music, and how did you get your start?
Yeah, sure. My family, very musical family, very musical household, music all the time. My dad, growing up, was a piano player. His mom was an organist, and my dad, even today, still plays the piano. He's a very accomplished piano, even though music wasn't what he went into. And my mom was a singer, always singing in church. I remember her teaching herself how to play guitar when I was growing up. She directed the church choir, and so it was always a part of our lives. For me in band, I grew up playing piano, but for joining band, I started as a sixth grader at Nolan Middle School in Killeen, Texas, on trombone. And I remember even back then, at a very early lesson, sitting in a lesson with our band director, Patrick Nault, just being amazed by him and thinking to myself, man, when I grow up, I want to be just like Mr. Nault. And so even early on in my schooling, I knew that music was going to be more than something that I just enjoyed, that it was something that I might want to spend my life pursuing and doing.
So you grew up in Killeen. Was your dad in the military?
He was in the military at that point. He had left and worked for a government contractor. So we still moved every couple of years. So from Killeen, we moved to El Paso, Texas. And I started my high school in El Paso, and then we moved again to Boise, Idaho. Oh, wow. Which is where I graduated from high school. Went to Centennial High School. And again, I've just been so fortunate to have strong teachers all along the way.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I often ask about my guests, sort of their experience in high school and middle school and how that influenced their current teaching and their current career. Do you think that moving around had any influence, or was it just having exceptional teachers at each stop along the way?
I think it was the teachers, and I really think it just boils down to them, and really just very lucky along the way. I don't know if my parents really were looking per se at the band programs when they were moving, but it certainly feels like they did based on where we ended up. Because just great teachers, and Phil Hartman, who is my high school band director at Centennial in Boise, is still a good friend and mentor right now, and it's great to be able to call him and catch up.
So do you remember any pieces or experiences from your high school or middle school that really stick out?
In high school, pieces for sure. And when we were at Hanks High School, I remember doing variations on America, Charles Ives, and Polka and Fugue, the Weinberg arranged by Bainham. Those pieces really stick out to me as, first of all, they're really awesome trombone pieces, but that just really resonated with me as a musician. One of the things I didn't mention talking about, kind of growing up in it is when I went to Northwestern University as an undergraduate. I went in as a trombone performance major, because as I got more serious in trombone through high school, and certainly through these musical experiences and the private teachers that I had, my shift went away from wanting to be a band director to more of being an orchestral musician, which I think most people, at least at the time, and I imagine still now, most students who entered Northwestern at that time wanted to be an orchestral musician when they entered school there. And so, yeah, I've kind of drifted away a little bit from the question, but that's kind of those. I'm sure that those are experiences are what really led me to wanting to be more of a performer than an educator at the time.
Sure. And so you mentioned that you did enter Northwestern as trombone performance. Do you remember the moment in high school where you said, "Okay, I'm going to go be a professional musician"?
I don't remember the moment, but it certainly evolved. I was really. My parents being kind of music in the background, private lessons were important to them, and so they were important to me. And I had private lessons all the way back from probably my very first week starting on the instrument. And, grew up in the traditional orchestral type of track in terms of learning excerpts in high school and doing the youth symphony. As well as doing honor bands and jazz ensembles and trying to be as well-rounded as I could. And just listening, listening to cassettes that my teacher made me of the orchestral standards and the heavy trombone literature that I needed to know.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So it just evolved, and I just knew when I was applying for colleges that trombone performance was the direction I wanted to go.
And so when did you decide to become a teacher and the music ed thing began to become important?
Well, and again, I'm not going to be able to put a specific moment on that. It just kind of evolved. I was fairly active as a teacher, even in my undergrad, in maybe not direct ways, but in several ways that it kind of caught my interest again. Teaching privately, being the section leader in the marching band, and having opportunities to lead rehearsals and to direct, even just through the conducting classes and taking basic conducting and then advanced conducting with Mr. Painter, really kind of sparked that interest. And I do know that it was more towards the middle of my senior year that I decided that I really wanted to go into music education and teach in the public schools as a band director. Because I remember distinctly thinking to myself, well, I should probably just finish this degree and then get the master's in music education and certification rather than switching at that point.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think these things are evolve as we go through school. I used to teach college freshmen music theory, and a lot of them would come in with one plan, and they'd often leave with another, as we know.
Right.
We don't really have all the answers when we're 18.
Right, or we don't even have them now. But yeah, it's just changed a lot, and even I think. Again, kind of going with what the plan everybody has when they're in school. My plan was to teach at McCracken for 3 or so years and then go get my doctorate in wind conducting. And so, yeah, so you just never know.
There's a couple things in there to unpack that you just said. I guess I should go with it, though, and we should talk about that. What is it about the job? I mean, why didn't you go on? What caught your attention, or what's caught your fancy about being a middle school band director?
Well, and I think, again, it's kind of funny because when I went into student teaching, like before, my preconceived notion is that middle school was not what I wanted to do. Once I went out into teaching, I was going to be a high school band director. And most of the jobs that I applied for coming out of school were all high school jobs. McCracken is actually, I haven't even mentioned this, I student taught at McCracken. So I knew the program, I knew its potential. My predecessor was here for 33 years, and really one of his great strengths was building the support in the community for the program. And so I kind of knew what was here, and I loved the kids, and I had a feeling that the goals I had for myself as a professional and the goals I would have for my program could be accomplished here. And so when I offered the job and I took it, it just, I don't know, it just felt right. And even, I can say 20, 23, 24 years later, it just feels right that I think, well, I hope, but I think I made the right decision. And I feel like we've accomplished some pretty nice things here. And I love working in this community. I love working with the administrators that I have. I love working with the fellow staff that we have here. And the kids are great. The community is awesome. And I really found a nice home.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It's remarkable to me that 33 years plus year 23, we're looking at 56 years of continuity in that school. That's remarkable.
Yeah, I'm only the third full-time band director
in the school's history.
In the school's history, yeah.
Wow. And so is there something in the community or in the school culture that's creating this continuity? Because you must have really great administrators, and you must have a lot of support for this to be such a comfortable place. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about maybe what makes that, or how we recognize that.
Absolutely. Have just the best administrators, which starts with our superintendent, Kate Donegan, who's been, she was our principal before she became superintendent. So yeah, just tremendous support, and not just the monetary support or them saying that they support you, but really supportive in virtually every aspect. It's not unusual for us to have, at a minimum one administrator at a concert, but often several times more than one. When Kate asks me what I need, she really means it. If she asks how can she help, what do we need, she means it. And when I give her the answer, I know that she's going to do her best to get us what that is, whether it's more contact time, whether it's more money, whether it's instruments, whether it's adjusting the calendar so we can take advantage of an opportunity that we have during the year. I know that support is there. And then in terms of the community, it's been, at least in this school, the program, I think that continuity of the directors has certainly helped a lot, of it just being an important part of the school culture and the kids' lives. Has made a big difference in the community, because the kids are totally bought in, and then when the kids are bought in, the parents buy in, and the parents are the community, and that gets reflected by the school board, and then on down.
I want to come back around again, Chip, to talking about Northwestern, because I have a couple questions about that. But before we do, you're talking about this idea of excellence in your program, and one of the commonalities I see among the great band directors that I've talked to is this expectation of excellence. And can you tell me how you foster that in your band room?
It starts with me. And I hold myself to a very high standard. I hold myself to a very high musical standard, a very high preparation standard. And I do think, even though I'm demanding a lot out of my students, that they recognize and see that I'm not asking them to do anything that I'm not doing myself. And I think when I first started teaching, it was pretty much, here's my vision, here's what we're going to try to accomplish here, and it was just working a million miles an hour to try to accomplish it. And the program here was good already, so in a lot of ways the standards were kind of set. And my challenge was to say, yes, we've accomplished a lot here, and this program has accomplished a lot, but I think we can do better, and I think we can do more, and I think this is my vision, and just trying to get the kids to buy into it a little bit. And some of that is just by sharing, playing recordings of other middle school programs, playing them recordings of the programs we were trying to aspire to be like. That's certainly a start. I also think that, especially early on, but even to this day, having models for our teaching and having models for our program are really important. And when I first started teaching, for us, it was Hendricks Junior High School in Tempe, Arizona. Douglas Akey was the band director there at the time. And I remember I attended the Midwest Clinic a lot, even as an undergrad. And I saw his band's performance at Midwest. And I remember sitting in that audience thinking to myself, wow, if I ever taught middle school, I would want my band program to be just like that, because it just seemed like that was the ideal middle school band program. And so when I started, that was the model. And we just did as much as we could to emulate what he did at Hendricks. And over the years, it's been different programs and different teachers, and it's not so much now trying to mirror everything a program is doing, but just kind of taking those things that I hear and love and trying to do those things with my own students.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. There's a couple things you said in there. And so let me start with, you mentioned coming into a program that was pretty well established. Do you have a sense of how long it took you before you sort of grew fully into the job where you were able to sort of execute your vision?
It was probably, everybody says you got to graduate into the entire thing. I don't think it took 5 years. We start in fourth grade and go all the way through eighth grade. I don't think it took all 5 years. The sixth grade class, my first year teaching, there were sixth graders really bought in to what we're trying to accomplish. So I would think maybe 3 years it started to kind of click a little bit.
And you talked about models. What models do you use today for your band?
I am a huge fan of the Henry Middle School Band program in Leander, Texas. Robert Herrings is the band director there. I am a huge fan of his, and I'm a huge fan of his program. There's just a lot. Farmington Junior High School, Heath Wolf is the director there. I am constantly amazed what he is able to do essentially by himself in that gigantic program, starting kids in seventh grade. Another Leander school, Stiles Middle School. It's just there's a lot of those programs. Chris Meredith at Shadow Ridge. It's just kind of just, some of it's YouTube, some of it's going to Midwest, and some of it's just kind of being aware of what other schools are doing. But just when you see the great teaching, it's just my ears perk up and my eyes perk up, and I'm just trying to catch as much as I can in terms of what they're doing.
The things they're doing down in Leander, Texas, holy cow.
Yeah, there's a bunch of great programs, and another one of them just got invited to Midwest next year, and I'm embarrassed I don't remember the name.
What are some of the best practices that you have to try to get the most out of the students? As far as I know, you start in fourth grade like I do, but what does your program look like?
So we start beginners in fourth grade, although we'll take beginners at any grade level. So if we have this year we had maybe 10-ish, a half dozen to 10 beginners that were in fifth grade who joined us in fifth grade. But even at the middle school level, if we have a student that comes to us and says they'd like to be in the band program, we'll find a way to start them and get them started in lessons outside of the program and get them into a band as quick as we can. But we have four bands. That fourth and fifth grade beginner band. We have the next level up is, we call it our intermediate band, which was almost all fifth graders with some sixth graders in there as well. Our concert band, which is the second band at the middle school, which is again it's mostly sixth graders with some seventh graders and eighth graders in there as well. And then our top group, the symphonic band, which is mostly seventh and eighth graders. And the program, if you're from the area, the way the program is set up schedule-wise makes a lot of sense. But if you're not from the area, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But all of our rehearsals are before and after school. They're outside of the school day. And then our days are filled with lessons and sectionals. So our fourth grade beginners are class pullouts. We see them in small groups of 3 or 4 throughout the once a week, and then we see them after school once a week for about 45 minutes. Our intermediate band, same things, small group lessons once a week, and then we see them after school twice a week for 50 minutes each. And then our top 2 groups rehearse at the same time. They rehearse before school every morning for about 35 minutes. And then after school on Tuesdays, we have a longer rehearsal. The top group rehearses for an hour and a half in that rehearsal. And then the concert band or second group just rehearses for an hour. But during the day, their lessons are more, the top group is more of a sectional type setup. And the second group is, we still are more developmental with them, working at a method book, more lessons, smaller groups, group lesson type work with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as I listen to that, you're seeing the 4th and 5th graders twice a week, the pull out plus after school.
Right.
And so how far are you getting with those 4th graders? How far do they end up?
In that first year, boy, if we hit the we use standards of excellence. So if we hit the 8th note pages, I'm pretty happy. And I'm really not even too worried about how far we get, and more worried about the foundation, the rhythmic foundation, and the tone foundation, and the rehearsal, the way they rehearse foundation. I kind of think of their first 2-ish years as their beginning year. So that fourth grade year is beginning band, and 5th grade, we don't call it, but it's really kind of beginning band part 2. In fact, we start them over in 5th grade. Every kid would go back to the very beginning of that method book.
That's excellent advice. I just finished my first year, and I'm looking at my 4th grade the same way. I see them twice a week. And so we got about halfway through a book, more or less. And it was the same thing. I taught them rhythm. I made sure that they all had a good embouchure. But, a lot of them, well, not a lot of them, but a few of them needed to switch instruments. They weren't in the right place. And so I was just going to go back to the beginning and try to just accelerate through and get to the end if I can by the end of 5th grade.
Yeah, I find that starting over does 2 things. It gives a nice review if they didn't work too much over the summer, which especially that grade, that when they're younger, they don't do as much over the summer as some of the older kids do. It allows you to catch some of the gaps in their learning that maybe they didn't notice and you didn't notice as you were working with them during the year. And they work through the material much faster, and it kind of sets a pace through that book that if they maintain it, the average kid will even likely finish that book 1 by the end of that 5th grade year. I'm not so sure they would if we just kind of pick back up where they left off that 4th grade year.
So tell me then about their 6th grade year. How are you moving them from that first year beginner, second year beginner to the intermediate advanced player that you have in your symphonic band?
Well, my philosophy has always been to take the kid where they're at and then to push them as far as they could get by the end of the year. So that really doesn't change from those 4th grade and 5th grade years when they get to the middle school. And for some of our sixth graders are in the top group, right? When they step on to the middle school campus, their 6th grade year, and it can be, especially depending on what instrument they play, that can be a pretty significant adjustment going from that 5th grade band jumping to our top ensemble. There's a big difference in doing a grade 1 jumping to a grade 3 or a grade 4.
Sure,
in terms of the maturity, and they're in that group because they're ready for it. There's still a little bit of an adjustment. And so it's just developmental and working on fundamentals and pushing them in their development outside of the repertoire as far as we can. And then the repertoire isn't necessarily as difficult as the material they're working out of. They're in their method books and that in the concert band. So they're working on material that's much more challenging than what they need for the repertoire. Mm-hmm. And then when they get into that top group, they have those fundamentals and they have the technique to be able to contribute to that group.
So you mentioned the essential elements, you mentioned the literature. What other supplemental materials are you using?
Almost everything is stuff that I've written out ourselves. just supplemental sheets, handouts as well. We switched to Darcy Williams teaching rhythm logically system a couple years ago, and that was a huge. That was the first rhythm system that really resonated with me and worked well with what I was trying to teach the kids and get them to learn. But I would say most of what we use is material that I've developed myself.
Our lessons aren't required, are they?
They're not required, no. They're heavily recommended and encouraged.
Mm-hmm. That's probably just part of that culture you talked about, that expectation of having lessons. Well,
I think so. And then, it's getting that list out and having it available when a parent asks you, they're thinking about getting a private teacher for their kid, having 2 or 3 names that will be a good personality fit for their kid, just at the ready. So when they ask and they're thinking about it, you can give them information so they can act on it immediately. I found if there's a delay in that, or if the information doesn't get to the parent fast enough and it's not on their mind anymore, then that's a delay between when they start on those lessons. But it's kind of a culture, and the kids see which kids are excelling, and they wonder why, and of course it's because they're taking lessons and getting extra help, and so they want to be like that, and so they talk to their parents about getting lessons too.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. That's one of the things I need to work on, is really getting a good comprehensive list of private teachers. That's one of my to-dos this summer.
It is important. It's very important.
I will say that for those, this is the second time I've been a band director at a new place. And so, boy, the summer between the first and the second year is really busy trying to make all the changes you now know need to happen.
Yeah, the list is long, and it's hard to get to all of it before that first day.
Well, and I don't have any expectation of getting through all of it. I just have to prioritize.
Right.
Make the small changes and nudge. I look at like a band program, like a cruise liner. You just have to nudge it to where you want it to go, because it's not stopping anytime soon.
No, and a lot you know this too from the positions, is you have to evolve the changes. Going in and changing things drastically almost never works. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of making changes little by little to get it where you want to go.
Even the most broken culture, there are still people who will resist change.
Oh, always.
Yep.
Oh, it's human nature to resist.
Yeah, that's true.
And even in our own teaching, it's human nature to resist making changes.
So you mentioned visiting other schools, and you talked a lot about other teachers and how you modeled for your students other bands. How about you? I know that have you visited other places? What's that like to go visit someone, and what's the importance of that for a teacher?
I think it's super important to have models, teaching models for ourselves, and teachers that we want to try to emulate. And for me, it's not necessary. I'm not necessarily going in to steal everything per se, but just trying to find things that they do well and trying to figure out how I can incorporate it in my own teaching and in my own program. And even though it's going to evolve some, it's evolving from a place of proven success. So if I'm watching Doug Akey teach, and I'm seeing how he's working on something, even if it's not exactly how I would work on it, I know where he's coming from, a place that has proved successful. So I have not gone into many schools around the country watching people teach. When I first started teaching, I did go out to schools in the area of some of the stronger programs in the Chicago suburbs to observe their program, see how it was set up, and to watch them teach. With in terms of watching other teachers now, it's mostly bringing in people to work with our kids. And they're there to work with my band, but they're really there for me, and that's my professional development, to sit there and to see how they would approach things. What are their priorities? What are they working on? What are they not working on? And how are they addressing the challenges? What are they focusing on versus what I would focus on? Because sometimes it's completely different in terms of what I would focus on. And so that's core where I am now in my career. That's been the biggest thing for me, is bringing in as many So just the very best musicians and the very best band directors I can to work with my kids, so I can see how they would work to make them better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mentioned that I was going to circle back around to Northwestern because you were there, and now John Painter was your first band director there?
He was. John Painter was director of bands there. Steve Peterson, who's at the University of Illinois now, was the marching band director and assistant director of bands. And Don Owens was also one of the band directors there. He did the jazz ensembles and the contemporary music ensemble.
Mm-hmm. So Northwestern sort of has it's become a legendary conducting program now. And so what did you get from Northwestern, or what was that experience? How has that affected you?
It's pretty indescribable in a lot of ways. I decided to go to Northwestern for really only one reason. It was to study with Frank Crisafulli, who was the trombone professor at Northwestern. He performed with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra for 50-ish years, and he had just retired when I was a freshman on campus. But I had a lesson with him as part of the audition process, and after that lesson, I knew that was the school that I wanted to go to. And so, almost embarrassingly, I didn't really know what else was happening at the school. I didn't know John Painter was there. I didn't necessarily even know who he was. Although in retrospect, I probably certainly played some of his arrangements in school. And I didn't, so I didn't really know, all the incredible staff and faculty that were there when I started, because it was really all about the trombone lessons and the trombone studio teacher. And then once I got on campus, of course, and was introduced to all these amazing teachers, it's just something else. And they were all, I don't know, it's just tough to put into words how they affected me, and not only as a musician, but as a person. But yeah, I mean, Mr. Painter's influence it's kind of overwhelming when you think about it, and his presence in that school and in the lives of the students that were there at that time is really significant, because he touched virtually every aspect of your education, even though, quote unquote, he was just the band director.
So, Chip, I asked my Texas directors, my Texas guests, about what makes Texas special, but Chicago also has sort of a mystique as far as music education. What makes Chicago special?
Well, I think it boils down to the person on the podium, and I think we just have a lot of tremendous people and a lot of tremendous band directors that are teaching in the area. And when great teachers are given the right level of support, and they'll do great things. And I think that's what you see. I mean, there are a tremendous amount of programs here, both high school and middle school, led by wonderful musicians and wonderful teachers that are amazing friends and colleagues, that they're able to maximize what they're given. And when they're given support and students who have bought into what they're trying to accomplish, when they maximize that, it's some truly great things. So, and I think that's not necessarily unique to any area, Chicago, Texas, or anything. But when you have great teachers that are well supported, that can maximize what they're given, good things are going to happen.
All right, Chip. How about composers? Have you done any commissions? Had anyone in to work with your groups?
We've had quite a few. The first one I mentioned, Douglas Akey, as kind of being a mentor and director of a program we were trying to model. The first couple commissions we did were from Doug, and some of that was because I loved his music, and I wanted him we wanted to do some works by him and to support his writing. But some of it was also just to give me more opportunity to call him up and talk to him and pick his brain about different teaching stuff. Whenever I had a tough decision to make, I would often call him up and get his advice. And this was really kind of pre-internet and pre-email, so it was a full-fledged phone call, and him always being very giving of his time and mentorship. But sure, we've commissioned a bunch, but I'd hate to miss any out. But Andrew Boyson Jr. we've commissioned as well. We did our consortium premiere of a piece by Viet Quang this past January of a trombone solo, Howls and Hymns. And it was great to have him in to work with the kids. But yeah, we've done several consortium stuff. We're currently members of the group is called Aspire, which is a commissioning consortium. There's a few dozen middle school and high school groups who have pulled together their money to commission several works, and that started a couple years ago, and the pieces are just starting to be delivered, which is pretty exciting.
So what do you find the value for your students? What does that mean for your students to have a composer come in or have a piece written where they're part of the creation?
I think anytime you can collaborate with other musicians, it's going to translate to a more interesting and inspiring experience for the kids. Just necessarily commissioning a piece and then doing the premiere, there's a lot of value in that, and it's a good experience for the kids. But having the composer in brings a different dimension, of course, as they learn kind of about the commissioning process themselves and the composer. One of the composers I forgot to mention, we were really lucky to get chosen for one of the BandQuest pieces a couple years ago, and Jim Stevenson was the composer that we were paired with, and in that, since he's local, he was nice enough to come out several times before he even started the piece and to listen to the kids and talk to the kids, and they had an opportunity to know him. He had an opportunity to know them before he even wrote. So he came out several times just as he was writing the piece, and then of course after it was finished, to work with them and talk with them and all that and all that. And it was just a terrific opportunity. And they really wanted to play that piece well for him, because they loved him and they really loved working with him, and they enjoy every time he was out. They really look forward to him coming out to spend some time with them. And that's just the experiences we provide the kids are valuable just intrinsically with the way, I believe, with how band's kind of set up. But those extra type of experiences, I think, carry a lot of meaning for them, and is long lasting, well past their time in our classroom.
So where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Well, for me, competition is a tool. And like any tool, and the way it affects the kids and the program is completely dependent on the person using that tool and how they use it. So I guess for me, I see a lot of value. There's a lot of value to me, and I think there's a lot of value to my students, to have a goal, to work as hard as you possibly can, or as hard as you possibly think you can, towards achieving that goal and failing. And I think there's value in that. And there's value in learning how you're going to react to that failure, and the real challenge and the real importance is what do you do after that failure, and how you approach it. And so that's kind of how I kind of approach competition. Where do I draw the line? I don't know between healthy and unhealthy, but I kind of, when I feel it, I know it's there. When I feel like we're approaching that line, I know to kind of take a step back in terms of how I'm approaching things. And so that's how I see it.
I meant to ask you, is your top group audition? Do the kids audition for that top group? Our top two bands are by audition. So there's a minimum performance standard for both our symphonic band and our concert band. Okay, I see. So there's a little competition built in there too.
There's some competition built there. We do have chair placements. There's competition built there. The honor bands that we do, there's competition built there. Even like we just applied to perform at the CBDNA North Central Division Conference. There's there's only 2 slots, so there's competition built in there. There's a lot of competition just kind of intrinsically built into our profession in a lot of ways, even though it might not directly say it's a competition. So in terms, we apply to Midwest. We've been lucky enough to be accepted twice, but we've been rejected many more times than twice. And there's value. It's a competition to get invited to that. And so I think there's value in it, and there's value in again, trying as hard as you can and just coming up a little bit short, and the next day not really dwelling on it, but just getting back to work and trying to be the best you can be at whatever you're trying to do, whether it's me trying to be a better teacher or the kids trying to be a better instrumentalist on their specific instrument.
All right, Chip. So you're going into year 24, correct?
Yes.
So how have you found a work-life balance in your career?
Work-life balance is a tough one for me to answer, as I'm sure, and as I know, a lot of your guests have trouble answering it. And it's because this job is such a passion, and it's tough. I can't necessarily differentiate the musician and me. It's all one. And so for me, that balance is more, what part of this work is the job, and what part of this work is not the job. And I try to leave as much of the job stuff at school as I can. The answering emails and checking your emails and doing many of the non-musical stuff, I try to leave it at school. Although at home, there's a lot of times where, that's it's kind of the thing about this job. Either you're doing it or you're thinking about it, even when you're not there. Yeah. And it's kind of a constant. But I don't know. I don't let it bother me so much. I do a lot of work at home, more than I should. In some ways, a lot of rehearsal preparation, a lot of listening to recordings, a lot of preparing for the next day's rehearsal, so that I'm showing up prepared. I do a lot, and but I expect my kids to do a lot too at home. So again, I'm not necessarily asking them to do anything that I'm not doing myself. I try to do as much as I can after my own kids go to bed, so that I'm not infringing on that time. But again, the work-life balance is a tough one for me.
What do you think the challenges are that are facing music education, and how can we best meet them?
Well, for me, the challenges that I see is it's all educator based, and it's about recruiting, training, mentoring, and retaining the very best people we can into this profession. Because with the right people, all those other challenges can be tackled. And this is a great job. I love teaching. I love being a band director. I love really everything about it. But it's as you know, it's a tough job too. It's very time consuming. You don't always feel, I'm saying this globally, not necessarily personally, but you don't always feel like you're getting the support that you need to be successful. There are certainly times as a teacher in any discipline that you feel underappreciated, and you start to wonder if what you're doing really matters. And we as a profession and we as a society need to do a better job, I think, supporting education and the teachers through those types of situations. Because if we can keep the right people teaching, then really nothing else matters, and we'll be able to tackle whatever comes our way.
I noticed that as we've gone through the interview, you keep coming back to teachers and individuals, and so you feel very strongly about your colleagues in the profession, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I really do, and I see great people doing great things. I mean, the teachers are the programs of the school. I mean, we it's not, without the teacher, the program's not there. and getting good people the right support can really provide a tremendous benefit to all our kids' education.
So, Chip, you talk about teachers and giving them the right support. How do we do this?
First and foremost, there needs to be some sort of support system in place, mentorship wise, and easily it needs to be more than just like a single source of mentorship. So the school district itself needs to have some sort of mentorship program. The organizations that teacher belongs to, and many organizations, at least in Illinois, do have those mentorship programs. I know our Illinois Grade School Music Association has a mentorship program. The National Band Association has a mentorship program, and getting these teachers into those so that they have other people that they can talk to. Because in Illinois, where there's certainly a lot more some rural programs as well, they might be the music teacher not just for their school, grades 5 through 12. They might essentially be the music teacher for the entire town, and without other people to talk to, that can certainly feel very, very lonely. And I think when you feel like you're all by yourself, that's when you start to wonder whether all that work you're putting into it is worth it. And, I don't have any stats, but I wonder what the retention is like for teachers who are kind of in that situation. There's certainly a financial component to success. And in terms of not only, I'm not talking necessarily about compensation salary wise, but in terms of supporting the program financially so that the kids have the equipment that they need to be successful, that they have the music that they need to be successful. And I think that's a very important aspect of it. And so one way that mentorship can help is helping these younger teachers find ways to secure that money from the school district, because the district and the school will pay for what they find is important. And so it's bringing the needs of the program to the attention of the administration and the school board. Not only what does the program need, but why does it need it? Why is it important for the kids? Why is it important for the school that they receive these resources? And for me here, it was just kind of an evolving process of making that information known as to the what and the why. And then once we got that funding, to maximize that funding so that the next time we asked for that support, it was a little bit easier to get that yes from the board and from the administration.
All right, Chip, if I were to able to give you a time machine, take you back to your 18-year-old self, your high school graduation, what advice would you give yourself?
I'm not so sure I would change too much. I believe there's a lot. I've kind of mentioned this in the past. We learn a lot through failure. I'm not so sure I would change too much in terms of what's happened past the high school graduation. But if there's one piece of advice, I guess probably would have been to practice a little bit more. But I practiced a lot. But I suppose a little bit more time wouldn't have necessarily hurt me too much.
Chip, if you had a chance to control it, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you would conduct, and why?
So my first gut instinct to this question was to answer the Persichetti Symphony. But I think instead of what specific piece it would be, I'm almost certain I would want it to be some sort of collaboration. Because when I think back on the last few years, my most exciting musical moments for me personally, and then which probably is reflected onto the kids, I would say, has been those opportunities that I've had a chance to collaborate with a soloist or collaborate with a composer or join forces with another group and do some sort of exchange. I would I think would want that last experience to be is some sort of collaboration. I'm thinking one of the most impactful. I was actually surprised by how emotionally impactful it was. We had the opportunity to host the Tamagawa Wind Orchestra. They were the middle school group from Tokyo, Japan. They were playing at the Midwest Clinic, and they rehearsed at our school for 3 days. We actually did a homestay where the kids stayed in our family's homes, and my wife and I, our family, hosted a couple of the students, and we did a joint rehearsal with their kids. I had the opportunity to work with them. Their conductor had an opportunity to work with our students, and then we gave a joint friendship concert, which we played a little bit. They gave their Midwest preview concert, and then we did a joint piece at the end. And I was, even though they were only here for 3 days, I was just blown away by the emotional impact that it had on my students, my students' families, and myself. It's those types of experiences that have been really meaningful to me. And if for my last hurrah, I think I would want it to be something like that, and some sort of collaboration with someone, something, or some group that could be meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Playing the Persichetti Symphony.
Yeah, sure. not with my McCracken band. No.
I'm just teasing. Chip, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
I actually do have a few things coming up that would be awesome to promote. The first, if you're in the Midwest, I host a band director workshop the first Tuesday of every November, November 5th, with a bunch of clinicians and demo groups, and usually a band performing as well at McCracken Middle School. And registration will open up probably in August. McCrackenBand.com/workshop is that web address. For my Illinois middle school band director friends, we have the All Illinois Junior Band, which I am one of the co-founders for and on the board of directors, which is a statewide middle school honor band for students in Illinois. And we have Robert Herrings from Henry Middle School as our guest conductor this year. That's in its 5th year, and it's been super, super successful. And then I have a book coming out, warm-up book called Chorales and Beyond, that I've co-authored with Timothy Loest and Kevin Lepper, which will hopefully be released by FJH this fall. We're still waiting on copyright permissions for one of the chorales to come through, but we'll either get that permission or we'll replace that chorale and get it out this fall, and we're really excited about that. I spent 5 years working on that book. It's really what I do at McCracken in written out form, and I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a great resource, I hope, for directors everywhere.
Awesome. Chip, how can people get in touch with you?
The easiest way is probably through McCrackenBand.com, and there's a contact link on that website to reach me.
Chip, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.